This video is dedicated to James Humphreys. James, thank you. Karn Legacy Reforged versus Sissay Weatherlight Captain. Just played this game now and we curve out quite nicely. It shows off what the deck wants to do. So I'm deciding to show it you all in the replay here. It's a fairly quick game, so we'll get back to the live ones after this. Have a decently fast start. We can go for a turn 3 Solemn, which likely takes us into our commander quickly. So we play a turn 1 Field of the Dead, I think. And we do draw into Fire Shrieker on our turn 1. Our opponent just playing out lands. We draw a Gilded Lotus, so it's Ancient Tomb here. And that will give us the 3 mana we need for the Fire Shrieker. Get the artifacts down as soon as possible, because obviously they buff our commander. Our opponent plays a 3 mana spell as well, that is Karn of Whispered Hopes. And we draw an Urza's Workshop. I think I play the Urza's Workshop here because it's good to get the Urza's lands down as soon as possible, because they do tend to buff each other up. Not that I ever expect to assemble Tron. And then it is a turn 3 Solemn Simulacrum. We've got about 8 wastes in the deck, I think, 8 basics, which is useful for cards like Solemn and Sword of the Animist. So we're on 5 mana by the end of turn 4. And our opponent throws down a Sigarda Heron's Grace. I said during the commentary originally that I obviously wasn't recording. This player builds really creative decks, tends to use the same commanders maybe within 2 or 3 different commanders, but always comes up with interesting brews, so not sure what my opponent's plan is here. Portal to Phyrexia is going to give our opponent a hard time if he decides to get the commander down next turn, assuming that we can play that. So in order to help us along with that, I think I go for the Karn here. And yep, so 3 artifacts in play, make it a 4th one with the Infiltration Lens. Can go Voltron in this deck, which is why the Fire Shrieker's in here, so thought Infiltration Lens would encourage our opponents to block and draw us some cards. One of the few ways of drawing cards in a colourless deck. And now we see Sissay, Weatherlight Captain, as we assumed our opponent would play here, so we are aiming for the Portal to Phyrexia. Noteworthy our Karn is currently a 5/5, and makes us 4 colourless mana for all of our artifact spells, so draw into our wastes, get down the Scavenger Grounds, was that? Trying to avoid playing too many wastes, because we obviously need 7 different land types for Field of the Dead. 7 different land names, that is. So using that 4 mana here, we can get down the Gilded Lotus first of all. Might as well ramp on our way to getting down the Portal to Phyrexia. And that allows us into 9 mana exactly, so we play the big artifact here. And that is effectively a one-sided board wipe. And we're looking to steal the Sigarda away from our opponent next turn. Swing in with what is now a 9/9 Karn and a 2/2 Solemn. Obviously makes 11 damage. And threatens commander damage next turn on the double strike. So our opponent either needs to remove Karn or get a blocker in the way here, but instead plays an Evasion of Chandalar, which is when it enters the battlefield, return 3 permanents from graveyard to hand. You'll note that they left the Sissay in the bin there. So switches off our Portal to Phyrexia, but we've got the game next turn thanks to the double strike. And if we can get 2 artifacts out here, that would land commander damage as well. Just get into an Inventor's Fair though. So playing the Inventor's Fair will trigger Field of the Dead for the first time. And that's just a means of getting chump blockers in the way, because we don't have too many creatures in this deck. Decide to get down the Hedron, just in case our opponent can remove the Karn. And then it's Fire Shrieker equipped, and with the floating mana from the Gilded Lotus, go for the Infiltration Lens as well. And Karn still being a 9/9, but now a 9/9 with double strike, means that we land lethal commander damage on our opponent here. And as ever, this opponent is a really good sport and decides to take it. Comes up with really creative decks, never ever gets salty. Is a really good sport from all the games that I've played with him, which have been a hell of a lot. So I thank him for that. We will get on with the live gameplays now. Up against Rathadrabik this time, and again we've got a decent amount of mana, which is certainly what we need in this deck, so going to keep this hand as well. We are on the play this time, so let's get down. I think you need to get down Urza's Saga a little bit later, because I want to be tapping into make Construct tokens with that. So maybe just forego the Urza's Saga for a little bit. Our opponent just cracking a fetch and getting down a tap land. We draw Duplicant, so let's go Reliquary Tower into Everflowing Chalice for only 2 mana. And now we're set up for going for the Urza's Saga next turn. I think we can start making some big constructs with that, I imagine. A Ledimir for our opponent. Mana Dork that taps for black mana. Okay, a Zenith Chronicler will get better as the game progresses, so drop the Urza Saga. And that just gains the ability to tap for colorless. We might as well get down. Yeah, the Basalt Monolith is a good way to spend our mana here. Won't bother getting down the Chronicler just yet because it isn't likely that our opponent will play multiple spells just yet, and it's not worth tapping out the Basalt Monolith for it. A Sack Outlet in Phyrexian Tower from our opponent. And now we see Kambal, Console of Allocation, so could be worth going for a duplicate onto that. We get pinged for 1 from the Mir. Okay, and it's a waste for us. The Urza Saga will gain the ability to make a construct. So let's go for the Zenith Chronicler, and then we can still tap into the Urza Saga to make a creature as well. Noteworthy, there's a Shizo here as well. That will give Fear, which cares about artifacts and black creatures. And obviously we're in an artifact deck, so hopefully that won't be too successful for them. So Ratadrabik into play. Oh, when it triggers off the first colourless spell, I thought it was the second one for some reason. So we draw into another waste. And then our opponent sacks the Kambal, so going to make a copy of that. And then throwing out a Marble Diamond with the 2 mana. So 4 cards left in hand. And I will activate the Urza Saga. We'll be able to do it again during the upkeep before this is sacrificed and turned into a Sol Ring. Okay, we draw into a Scavenger Grounds. Always useful to see what you draw into before you worry about the Urza Saga. So with the 3rd ability on the stack, this 2 mana is going to be instantly replaced. Urza is going to be sacrificed here, and we could go for a Commander's Plate actually, as opposed to going after a Sol Ring. I think Commander's Plate might actually be more useful here, so we'll grab that, throw out the Scavenger Grounds, and let's equip one of these big constructs, which is now a 6/6. It's about to be bigger than that though. Obviously this creature isn't legendary, so we had to pay a lot more mana, 5 mana to equip. But yeah, that is now a 9/9 that our opponent isn't going to be able to block unless he holds back the Ledimir, which obviously takes him off mana. You won't see much more success from the Commander's Plate than when it's in a deck that doesn't have any colours whatsoever. The Erebos Bleak-Hearted now, and they sacrifice the Ledimir in order to put life into that and draw a card. So we've got 3 cards in hand now. And there we see Gix Yawgmoth Praetor. Erebos has been animated thanks to all the black pips as well. But we have protection from all this stuff. Okay, so there's a Vidalcan Orrery, which is tempting. Throw down the Tomb of the Spirit Dragon. This just gains us some life for every colourless creature we control. Okay, so we could just play out the duplicant here, but they're going to have to swing into a big construct token. Could get rid of the Erebos because it's indestructible. But I think we're just outracing our opponent here. Let's go for the Karn. That should make us a decent chunk of mana next turn, and then we'll be able to get down Vidalcan Orrery and the duplicant, I imagine. 7 artifacts in play at the moment. And that means that we're swinging in for 10 this time, putting our opponent on a decent clock. So they plummet down to 17. We're still pretty much at our starting life total. Okay, and now the commander being given Fear. I don't think that does what our opponent is hoping it's going to do. We'll risk losing a construct to that. Might be able to give it Death Touch or something, but I just don't think our opponent knows what Fear does. Yep, so losing their commander. Maybe, I mean, they can put 2 life with the Erebos into this to draw another card, try and get into another answer. We could have just allowed that through, but I'd rather they spend the mana to recast their commander and waste time like that, because Ratadrabik decks do need to have their commander in play. See another tapped rock, Charcoal Diamond this time, completing the set. Alright, and we get round to our turn, so Karn's Legacy Reforged is going to trigger, gets us 7 colourless mana. We just draw into a Karn's Bastion, so I'll play that out here. Want to keep the Homeward Path a secret in case they can wipe the board and then reanimate everything under their control. It'd be nice to drop this and steal all of our stuff back. So yeah, might as well just play the duplicant here. So let's just go for the Vidalcan Orrery, and we can still hold up the mana for the duplicant if we want to. In fact, I think we're probably going wide on our opponent anyway here. So let's swing everything in at them. And we can always respond with a duplicant if needs be. Okay, but they just decide to double block, that's fine. Obviously could have used the duplicant to get one of the blockers out of the way, but I'm curious to see what my opponent's doing here. Drawing more cards with the Erebos, most likely. Oh, actually, they have to put life into that, so yeah, only drawing one more card. And then we'll use the 3 floating mana from the Karn to untap the Basalt Monolith. Can use it on abilities, just can't use it on any spells that are not artifacts. Obviously giving our opponent another turn here. So we'll see if we can get into a board wipe or something. Simply for the sake of making the game interesting. Okay, let's Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite, that won't do it. In response, let's gain some life from this thing. That puts us north of our starting life total. Does get rid of the Zenith Chronicler, which will debuff our creatures by 1 because we lose an artifact, and then 2 from the Grand Cenobite, obviously. So we get into 7 mana from the construct. There is a Mind's Eye. Let's just stop playing with our food here and go through for lethal. And I will cast the duplicate here just in case my opponent has something, because I don't want to be losing my commander if I don't need to. Get rid of the Elesh Norn. And again, big thank you to my opponent for playing it out. We are getting pretty lucky here, actually getting some full games and some good sports that we're up against. We'll play one more, I think. Karn Legacy Reforged versus the Dragon. And for once we have no lands in our opening hand. Okay, into a whole bunch of mana there, so yeah, should be able to get our commander down pretty quickly and hopefully equip the sword to it. That should hopefully keep us in it. We'll put the Scavenger Grounds. Actually, might as well just go for the waste. We're likely to draw into more wastes. And I am wanting to have as many different lands in play as possible for that Field of the Dead that we saw in the first game. Our opponent played a red source there and then tapped it down. I thought we were going to see a destruction of the Sol Ring. Drawing 2 Thought Vessels, so it's Urza's Mine, and we can go Thought Vessel and for the sword here. And this is the new Sword of Forging Frontier. Well, actually, it's not as new as the most recent sword now, but hoping that we can get some ramp from this and exile some decent cards off the top. Again, one of the few ways of getting card advantage in colorless. Our opponent just on double red at the minute. Spells cost a generic less to cast. Alright, that's fine with me. Oh wow, so we draw into Ancient Tomb. I bet that means we can afford Ugin. Yep. Thanks to the Helm of Awakening, that is far too tempting. Definitely get down the Ugin thanks to that thing. And yeah, well likely, if they don't get down a Hasty Dragon, which isn't likely unless they get into some fast mana. They've got 3 mana at the moment. Maybe there's a 4 mana dragon with haste they can hit Ugin with. But if not, we're likely getting down the limit break on the Ugin, I imagine. Interesting that they're in mono red, so maybe this is a mono red deck. I don't see why you'd run the Ur Dragon in a mono red deck though. Maybe simply just for the eminence cost. Okay, so there is a 4 mana dragon, makes some treasures. Does not have haste though, and we can bolt this thing. Followed by an Obsidian Charmor. And that will destroy our Ancient Tomb, which takes us down a fair amount of mana, but Helm of Awakening helps us anyway. And yeah, our opponent can't catch a break here. Let's destroy the Rapacious Dragon. And then we're just getting lucky this game. We draw into another Ugin, which will allow us to destroy the Charmor. And that keeps us online for the Ugin minusing down next turn. A Dragon's Horde for our opponent. We'll continue to fix the colours, assuming that he needs his colours fixing. And more ramp in Urza's Incubator. Makes some really cheap dragons. So they'll cost 4 less at the moment, including the commander. Only 2 cards left in hand though. So Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. What's the caveat on this? If you control 7 or more lands, which we're not going to. Minus down on the Ugin while we've got the chance. And that allows us into, let's see here, where we'll just cast everything. So it's Traxos, Doubling Cube, Infiltration Lens, Jeweled Lotus, and an O-Stone. Throw down Field of the Dead. We'll get our 2 lands into play with the Ugin. Might as well plus on the other Ugin, making a Spirit Token. There's a Mishra's Workshop under that. Our commander only costs 2 mana, so I'll just tap a Sol Ring into that. Don't even need the Jeweled Lotus. Traxos is going to untap. Does not have haste, unfortunately. So, yeah, we'll just equip onto our commander. Give it protection from red, which might be relevant against what seems to be a mono red player. Throw the Infiltration Lens onto the Traxos, because they will be able to block that, I imagine. And then we're just holding up Spatial Contortion, which can give -3 to something. Don't think that'll be relevant against dragons, but you never know. Can always kill off one of our own spirit tokens to grab some card advantage. That is a Drakuseth, which will put a counter on the Dragon's Horde, and they can draw a card with that if they want to. And they do, so it's likely that they'll get into a dragon that they might be able to cast here. Instead deciding to just tap out. So the Lightning Bolt, along with the -3 on this from the Ugin, might be able to get rid of a dragon here and there. We make 9 mana from the Karn, which takes us into a Gilded Lotus for free. And that hardly costs any mana anyway, thanks to the cost reduction on this, and on the Ugin the Ineffable as well. So plus on the Spirit token, and that shows us a Basalt Monolith. Our mana doesn't empty as Steps and Phases end here, so we might as well hit our opponent and see if we can get something decent off the top. We'll exile 2 cards with that. Let's go for the Traxo, swinging in as well. I suppose I could have swung in with the Spirit token. They would have blocked the Spirit token, I dare say. Then we could have bolted it and gone for Spatial Contortion as well. That probably would have been the thing to do there. Help us keep the Ugin in play as long as possible. Instead deciding to take a heap of damage. So the Sword of Forging Frontier triggers. Just getting 2 wastes off the top is pretty unlucky. So we'll just play a waste and another waste. And we're 1 non-wasteland away from triggering Field of the Dead. Tick up on the Ugin. Might as well bolt our opponent for some damage. Yeah, kicking myself that I didn't swing in with the Spirit token now. And we can obviously go for Oblivion Stone, putting a Divinity counter or a Fate counter onto something at the end of my opponent's turn. So now we see Sarkhan's Triumph searching for a dragon, which they'll no doubt be able to cast. Having the Pro Red really helps us here though. Okay, a Hellkite Courser, so it's a mono red deck, but they can get down the Ur Dragon with this thing. And that does trigger the Dragon's Horde for some more card draw, going up to 2 cards in hand. The Ur Dragon comes down, we've got 45 life, they draw a card from the Dragon's Horde, and after that we see Orb of Dragonkind. So yeah, it looks like we likely would have seen the back of Ugin regardless here, because they can just swing in at that directly. They don't need to here, because both Drakuseth and the Ur Dragon can hit us for 17, and then Drakuseth can throw some damage around, including at the Planeswalkers. That triggers the Ur Dragon as well, so they'll draw a couple of cards and be able to put a permanent into play. Alright, so it's 4 damage to us from Drakuseth and 3 onto each of the walkers. And they threw out a Ruby Medallion for some more cost reduction, which suggests to me that they don't have another dragon in hand. In response, I'll put a Fate counter onto my commander. And we're going to have to make some decent draws here, I think, now that we've lost those Planeswalkers. Not getting rid of the Drakuseth, while we might have had a chance to, could be detrimental to us. The Ur Dragon going back into the command zone. We'll make a whole bunch of mana with Karn Legacy Reforged. Okay, there's a Moonsilver Key, that's not the worst thing, so let's go Doubling Cube. Put 3 generic mana into that, and that makes us 10 more mana, so we can go for Moonsilver Key. I'll spend the mana that will evaporate during phases and end steps and all the rest of it. Crack the Moonsilver Key, no idea what I'm going for here, to be honest. Only the 3rd time playing the deck. We are 3 for 3 on successful recordings so far, which is unheard of. We could make that a Hedron Archive, or where is it? The Dreamstone Hedron. Has to be a mana ability for one of these, so one that can be sacrificed and draws some cards is probably a good idea. Yeah, getting into the Fire Shrieker would be good, because we'll have lethal on our commander if we can do that. So sacrifice this straight away. And that will draw us 3 cards. Gets us into Meteor Golem onto the Drakuseth is great. Voltaic Key, so we can put more divinity counters on stuff is good, so that's free. Thanks to our opponent's artifact. Can maybe do some stuff so that we can untap the Traxos. So yeah, we'll go through to combat here. We'll attack with all creatures, see if we get some card advantage from the spirit tokens. Obviously doing it this way might dictate what we actually play as well, because we've still got the sword to contend with. So the Hellkite Courser going to go down to the Traxos, so that plan worked out nicely. Drawing 2 to the Infiltration Lens, maybe aiming to try and wipe the board next turn. So that gets us into Everflowing Chalice. It's noteworthy that our opponent does have quite a few 2-drops here. So Karn's Silex onto 2 mana stuff might be alright. Anyway, the Traxos has Trample, so we do get a bit of damage through there. Get our opponent down to 7. Sword of Forging Frontier triggers. And, alright, that's a Commander's Plate, which pretty much seals it. A Wastes as well is not bad. Although, for only 8 wastes in the deck, I'd rather we were getting into the non-lands, or the non-basics, because not triggering field here. Commander's Plate is free, and that does untap the Traxos as well. So I think we'll tap down the Gilded Lotus, untap the Doubling Cube with the Voltaic Key, and then we can tap out here as far as I'm concerned. I'll leave a couple of mana up just in case, but let's go for Doubling Cube into that. So that means that we've got 30 mana to play with, so Everflowing Chalice for, I don't know, 10. Which means we have 1 mana left floating because it costs 1 less. Our opponent cracking the Orb of Dragonkind. Looking at the top 7 cards to reveal a dragon. Oh, and it's a Terror of the Peaks, which is pretty frightening. Luckily we've got a decent amount of mana, or a decent amount of life. So I don't think our opponent can quite do anything about us here. So the Chalice comes down, now taps for 10 mana. So let's go Unwinding Clock. And that will make sure that all of our stuff untaps. We'll definitely get down the Meteor Golem before I put too much mana into something else. And Meteor Golem is going to go after the Drakuseth here. And then it's a Divinity counter. I keep saying Divinity counter, a Fate counter. Onto Traxos I think is fine. Might as well put 5 mana into protecting Traxos from colours as well. And then we can play the Karn Silex. And we've still got mana held up for the Spatial Contortion, so yeah, that turned out pretty perfectly. Go through to our turn and see how many dragons our opponent can play into this Terror of the Peaks. Can always crack the Oblivion Stone if we're desperate. Drawing a card to the Dragon's Hoard. It often feels bad having Jeweled Lotus just sit there and not have you get your commander back, because it can always be removed and not pay for some command attacks, but the great thing about this deck is you can have otherwise dead cards just sit on the field, and this will have them generate mana. Could go for X's 3 as well onto the Karn Silex. That would get rid of the Dragon's Hoard and the Urza's Incubator. We'd only lose a few things with that. Does include the Oblivion Stone though, so yeah, we're just forcing our opponent to actually do something about us here. And there we see the Terror of the Peaks. See if they can deal 24 damage to us. A Ganax Astral Hunter enters the battlefield, treasure tokens, yeah, that's fine. And that means that we're seeing a lightning bolt here. So bolting us directly. And this is where the land that generates that extra life for us that we saw previously could be relevant. Okay, and Utvara Hellkite. They don't have haste on their stuff, but they managed to put haste on everything. They could get us here. Obviously if they do that, we'll be forced to crack the O-Stone. That's a further 6 damage to us from the Terror. And yeah, our opponent got as far as he could, but couldn't quite make it happen, unfortunately. We were drawing into Urza's Power Plant, just getting 1 step closer to Tron, but yeah, weren't doing too much of anything else. We pretty much just swing in next turn for lethal. Okay, Forsaken Monument gains us some life. Make Construct tokens here, Sensei's Top, part of a combo. Yeah, it's always surprising to me how incredibly well colourless decks can do. Colourless decks actually do better than mono white decks, which I don't think there's any realm in which that should be the case, but well, there we are. Hopefully you all enjoyed this visit to the brand new Karn Legacy Reforged. A big thank you to all my opponents today for playing the games all the way through, and a huge thank you to the patrons as well, who support the channel so consistently. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.